Welcome to the Twist News. I'm Erika Grey. Today I'm going to do a deep dive into Donald Trump's mineral deal with Ukraine. And I want you to be ready for a little bit of a lengthy video and also me reading some notes, because there's no way I could possibly have all the facts in my head. So just be patient as I read some notes. And I have some good ones here because these are from Serhiy Kolisnyk, Kolisnyk, and he is an attorney at law and head of the lobby club in the Kyiv office, associate professor of the National Academy of Internal Affairs, PhD in law. I'm getting tired reading all of his accolades. Wait to see if I have enough breath. Over 15 years of experience in human rights protection. So he wrote, U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal, implications for Ukraine's economy and investment climate. And pretty much this was a very happy paper. Happy paper because he called the deal a landmark minerals deal aimed at jointly developing Ukraine's rich natural resources, ranging from rare earth elements to oil and gas in exchange for funding Ukraine's reconstruction. So he talked about how it was announced in February and that it has been being negotiated. And then he gives a really interesting diagram of Ukraine's mineral resources. So I'm going to cite just a couple of facts from here. One, a large amount of Ukraine's minerals are located in Russian-occupied territories. Ukraine claims to have 15 trillion US dollars in minerals, which includes Europe's largest reserves of lithium, uranium, and titanium. But Ukraine constitutes 5% of critical raw materials of what the European Union would need, or 5% of the world's. So we have those little key figures as I rustle papers. Including Europe's largest deposits of lithium, uranium, and titanium. So this is the reason for the appeal of Ukraine's mining sector to international investors. It states here that the key details are the creation of a reconstruction investment fund jointly managed by both countries. Under the draft terms, Ukraine will contribute 50% of the revenues from the future development of its state-owned natural resources into this fund, which will reinvest those back into Ukraine. Half going into Ukraine's budget and half funneled to the joint new fund. The United States, for its part, is expected to make a long-term financial commitment to support the fund and Ukraine's post-war economic recovery. One of the driving forces behind the U.S. interest in this deal is Ukraine's vast reserve of critical minerals. So again, with the largest reserves of lithium, titanium, and uranium. Lithium for batteries, titanium for aerospace and defense, and uranium. It also has significant deposits of graphite, manganese, iron ores, beryllium, and rare earth elements. 23 of the 50 minerals deemed critical by the U.S. government for high-tech and defense industries. For years, this natural wealth remained largely untapped due to underinvestment and regulatory hurdles, a situation worsened by the ongoing war. Well, as I've always stated, Ukraine is a cash cow. Not only does it have 30% of the world's wheat crop, but it's also rich on minerals. And I'm sure before the Russia-Ukraine conflict began and Europe's throwing so much money at Ukraine, as well as the U.S., I'm sure the mineral facts were known, and that was a good reason for part of the support. As I've stated, Ukraine is a cash cow for the European Union and also for the United States. So let's see, Kyiv officials speak of trillions of dollars in untapped minerals, and it makes it a powerful magnet for foreign investment, according to the article. So under the framework, the U.S. gains a stake in Ukraine's resource development in return for its financial support. But the deal does not include explicit U.S. security guarantees. Desire to invest in a free, sovereign, and secure Ukraine even references the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which memorialized Ukraine's surrender of its nuclear arsenal in exchange for international security assurances. However, no binding defense clause was ultimately included. Also, the structure of the deal brings up questions about economic sovereignty and implementation. By committing 50% of state resource revenues to a foreign partnered fund, Ukraine is effectively earmarking a large share of its natural wealth for joint management. So the next question has to be, what is the European Union's response, and can the United States continue with this agreement once Ukraine, applying for EU membership and is on fast track to EU membership, becomes a member? So I pose that question to the attorney, cited the Czech Republic and Slovakia, which had to dissolve its customs union once they became members. And according to the attorney, it was drafted in light of EU law. Considering Ukraine's course toward EU membership, the agreement with the U.S. was specifically designed to avoid conflicts with European legislation. The framework agreement explicitly states that when preparing the final agreement, the parties will seek to prevent conflict with Ukraine's obligations as part of its EU accession process. This is an important legal safeguard. The agreement is structured as a commercial partnership, not as an international trade or resource sharing treaty, which could potentially conflict with EU policy. In practice, compliance with EU law will mean that the investment regime in Ukraine's extractive sector will remain open and non-discriminatory. Moreover, the EU is closely monitoring these negotiations and would likely have already intervened, knowing Ukraine's strategic objective of joining the Union. The geopolitical context further motivates both Ukraine and the U.S. to ensure that the agreement is transparent and compliant with EU rules, to avoid any conflict of interest ahead of Ukraine's accession to the EU. In conclusion, provided the reforms continue and coordination with Brussels is maintained, Ukraine will be able to leverage its mineral potential for the benefits of both its economy and the strategic interests of the EU, while avoiding legal pitfalls associated with regulatory misalignment. Now, the EU has maintained a partnership with Ukraine on critical raw materials since 2021, formalized through a memorandum of understanding. This agreement focuses, and again I'm reading, on securing supply chains for the EU while fostering local value creation and capacity building in Ukraine, ensuring mutual benefits. The European Commission has emphasized that this cooperation is not about competing with the U.S., but about strengthening a mutually beneficial partnership. Nevertheless, EU officials have wondered if this deal could undermine their agreement with Ukraine. And if there is, it would need to be reassessed. But I just read you from the attorney who said that this is carefully drafted. Now, I'm getting this information from sources. And if Washington had some very skilled individuals in EU law drafting this, then this is a major win for the United States and a major win for Donald Trump. But what's going to need to be followed is to make sure that EU law doesn't evolve in a way or change in a way regarding critical raw materials that is going to infringe in any way on this agreement. It's definitely going to be something to keep in mind as a possibility. But for now, it's a win. And I would also think that the United States having this kind of investment in Ukraine, which is going to become an EU member, which is only going to benefit Ukraine, is also going to benefit the European Union when it absorbs as a member this cash cow, or its cash cow. So that is my analysis. My opinion on the matter is that they can also look at this as something that's going to benefit their economy, because a stronger Ukraine or a more prosperous Ukraine is also in their interests. And this would help Ukraine and alleviate some of the burden off of the EU. But at the end of the day, Ukraine is going to be an EU member. So whatever benefits result from even this agreement will benefit the EU as a whole. But for now, this is a major win on the part of Donald Trump and his administration. This deal, you're going to want to stay tuned to this channel for more. If there's updates on it, I will be reporting. And be sure to hit that subscribe button if you don't subscribe. Well, this has been Erika Grey of the Twist News.